and famous pictures, for example, if you looked at famous synapses, which are, say, the ones that allow you to contract your muscle, right, they are jam-packed with mitochondria. But if you look in the brain at where there's synapses not between a neuron and a muscle, but between two different neurons, it's considerably sparser. So the average number in most of the literature is about half of synapses have a nearby mitochondria, but only
half of synapses in the brain tend to have one nearby.
One, yeah. Oh, no, yeah, only one nearby, half of them. So half don't. half have zero. So we've been intrigued about the significance of that rather low number. We haven't come to any clear conclusion so far about the significance of that low number. I have a hand-waving explanation for why it may not be as interesting as it sounds, which is that you probably can steal from a neighbor when you need to. And it depends on how far away you are from your neighbors. So, and the density of synapses in an axon in the brain is actually relatively high. So you may never be that far away from a neighbor who happens to have a mitochondria.
I see. So even though a mitochondria might not be in a synapse and it's far away in terms of the line you might trace on the inside of the cell from that synapse to a mitochondrion, there's like lateral movement from one synapse to another, and so maybe there could be ways.
We're still working on seeing if what I just said really holds up.
Okay, but all neurons are going to have mitochondria in them. Any given synapse may or may not have one. On average, you said, about half the synapses don't really have one nearby, whatever exactly nearby means, and half of them do. So adjacent to the synapse or in the synapse. And then, of course, there are some synapses like the neuromuscular junction synapses that have lots of mitochondria in them. So there's a huge spread here. And, just thinking about this on an intuitive level, it makes a lot of sense to me that the neuromuscular junction, that type of synapse, would have a lot of mitochondria, because I would imagine that's naturally and especially energy intensive synapse, because that's what actually where the rubber meets the road and the muscles move to propel the body through space. That's in large part what I think nervous systems are doing, right? They're about moving the organism. Other neurons in the brain do very different things, and there's lots of diversity. At a high level, is there any obvious mapping between the mitochondrial density at a synapse and like what it's doing in terms of its energy intensity, or is it all kind of mysterious still?
I would say it's mostly mysterious. What seems interesting is still mysterious. So there are synapses in the brain which also have extremely high density. I'll give you an example. It was a model that was sort of famous amongst biophysicists for the last 30 years because it was a giant relay synapse in the auditory system. And its job was really to relay auditory information, not so much processing it, right? It's just like in the chain of command going from a sound causing a vibration in your ear, there are these synapses, and a famous one was in the auditory brainstem called the calyx of Held. Biophysicists loved it because it was big, you could patch onto it, make recordings, be as reductionist as you could. Those ones famously are jam full of mitochondria as well. But I view them as sort of the equivalent of the neuromuscular junction in their job. It's sort of a fail-safe, pass it through, do this really well. And so resources have been developed to make sure that doesn't fail at the energetic level, I presume. Now, we don't understand what there when you cast through most of the rest of the brain aren't synapses that look like that, right? They're these small, tiny little varicosities that may or may not have a mitochondria. And so that's where I would say there's still plenty of work and discoveries to be made about the significance of the density of those and the details. I mean, I'm optimistic we'll begin to learn those things as better tools become available.
And so when we think about just a synapse, I'll let you pick the examples, but when we think of just a canonical synapse, what are there particular components of the synaptic machinery that are sucking up most of the energy, or is it kind of spread across lots of different things? I just want to get thinking about like, is there anything where a disproportionate amount of the energy is going? Is a lot of it for synaptic vesicle release and the regulation of that? Is a lot of it for other stuff?
So this is a subject that's a bit fraught with somewhat different opinions, but it's based on slightly different types of data and also different interpretation, just to be fully transparent about this. So one of the things, we'll get to this later, but we made this observation more than a decade ago that how fragile synapses were metabolically. That they broke rather quickly when you cut off their fuel supply. So that's really what convinced me to keep studying it, because it was such a big effect. I felt like there was things that we might be able to make hay and understand it better because there were big effects. Now I want to separate though a little bit of confusion. Because they break so quickly, it doesn't necessarily mean that we found the most expensive thing. We found the most sensitive thing. And the analogy I like to give, if I ask, in your budget to run your life, right? Most people, when they reach a certain age, the biggest, once they're adults, is they're paying for their mortgage or their rent. Right? On the other hand, if I drop your salary by a factor of 10, I'm not going to kill you. You might become homeless. You might not be able to pay your rent. You'll scramble. What will kill you is if I stop feeding you.
Right.
So the food isn't necessarily the most expensive part of your budget, but it is the most sensitive part to keeping you alive.
Right.
So I use this analogy of the synapse. We know that what we've discovered for sure is an extremely sensitive point that breaks easily if we don't provide it with enough energy. The question is, who was the big consumer is a slightly different question that truthfully, we're still working on. And we think we have some pretty good ideas.